What is a MEC? Modified Endowment Contract. How do you perfect a MEC? In other words, unmec it, so to speak, to regain the tax-free access to your money. Get ready in this educational episode. I think you're going to gain insights into what a MEC is. Is it all that bad? How do you perfect a MEC so that you can continue to access your money tax-free? And when do you actually, on purpose, create a MEC? Get ready. So I'm Doug Andrew, and I've been helping people optimize assets by increasing liquidity, safety, rate of return, and tax benefits now for 5 decades. My favorite financial vehicle to accomplish that is a properly structured, maximum funded, indexed universal life insurance contract. If it's structured correctly and funded properly, it is deemed a laser fund. So when we talk about asset optimization, you're helping people reposition assets to increase the liquidity, the ability to access money when you need it, the safety of that money, the rate of return, and the tax benefits. Otherwise, they ought to leave those assets where they're at. Well, there's a lot of assets that do not pass that laser test very well. And so when people have come to me for the last 5 decades, they usually are not necessarily wanting or needing life insurance for the death benefit. They like that it comes along for the ride. Their primary purpose is tax-free accumulation and tax-free income. And so they're trying to get away with the least amount of insurance they can under IRS guidelines. That's under the TEFRA and DEFRA tax citations. And it doesn't matter how old they are or how unhealthy they are, because if they're after rate of return, the rate of return is the same. The cost of insurance is the same no matter how old you are, because the amount of insurance required under TEFRA and DEFRA goes down the older you are and the more unhealthy you are, so that you get the same rate of return. And so when Indexed Universal Life came out in 1997, it is following in the tracks of Universal Life, which was introduced by E.F. Hutton in 1980 to be used primarily as a living benefit. Long story short, it came out in 1980, and golly, it was like buy term invest the difference under a tax-free umbrella. It was like buy term invest the difference on steroids. And so what you're doing with Universal Life is you're taking the least amount of insurance that you can get away with and put in the most money the IRS allows, because you want the cash value to grow to equal and exceed the death benefit as soon as possible, so that you're self-insured. And now your cash value and death benefit is just the same and growing, and it creates tax-free income, okay? So why did they do this? Because under 3 sections of the Internal Revenue Code, permanent life insurance is the only financial instrument that for over 108 years allows you to accumulate your money tax-free. All the interest and dividends, the growth, is tax-free under Section 72E of the Internal Revenue Code. Section 7702 says that if you want to access money out of your permanent life insurance policy, the cash value while you're alive, you don't have to pay tax on any of that, including the gain. Wow. And ultimately, when you die, the cash value usually blossoms and then transfers out tax-free in the form of a life insurance death benefit. That's tax-free under Section 101A. Nothing else does that, okay? All E.F. Hutton said was, well, why don't we use it for living benefits? Why don't we create tax-free income so that every $1 million that grows inside of one of these things can generate 8, 9, 10% payout, $100,000 a year of tax-free income, compared to the financial services industry that only wants you to pull out 4% a year, $40,000 a year, okay? Because $80,000 is twice as much as $40,000. $100,000 is way better than $40,000, because the $40,000 is taxable if it's an IRA or 401k, whereas this is tax-free, okay? So way back in 1980, there was a massive exodus of money that was leaving the banks, the brokerage firms, the credit unions into these because they were safer. They paid higher interest. They were tax-free, and they blossomed when you die, and so they couldn't compete. Well, so there was a whole bunch of people, including my own clients, that I had over 3,000 clients in 13 Western states in 1980. They were never happier than when I got their money out of the volatile stock market and the mutual funds and over into these, where they could predictably earn 11 and net 10. Only 1% of their interest was paying for the insurance, whereas 1% of the assets that we were managing, they paid that fee anyway. But here, the 1%, they were getting life insurance coming along for the ride. Whereas the 1% asset management fee, they were just suffering on a little bit lower rate of return. But if they earn 12% in a mutual fund, after tax in a 33% bracket, if $1 million nest egg generated a 12% payout, 120 grand, they only netted 80,000 after tax to buy gas and groceries, 70,000 after deducting another 1% in fees. See, E.F. Hutton said, why? Why do you want to have to earn 12 to net 7 when all you have to do is earn 11 in an insurance policy to net 10? And how do you do that? You create it for living benefits. You take the least amount of insurance the IRS will let you get away with, and you put in the most money the IRS allows. And back in 1980 till 1990, I never got credited less than 11.75% on my universal life. I got credited as high as 15.5%, but I could earn 11 and net 10. It was incredible. That's why they did it. Okay. And then when interest rates started to come down, and in 1997, they introduced indexed universal life. So you can still, by diversifying and rebalancing and participating when the market goes up and not lose when the market goes down. In other words, indexed universal life allows you to buy low and sell high, so to speak. Everybody else that has their money in the market does the opposite. Well, this became very popular. So the IRS went to E.F. Hutton and said, what are you doing? And we think you're violating the definitions of tax-free. We think this should be deemed an investment in the Internal Revenue Code, subject to tax. You're abusing these tax-free sections. So they went to court. E.F. Hutton won. They weren't doing anything wrong. And, the IRS is like, well, why does somebody put $500,000 into a tiny little life insurance policy? And they said, our clients do. So then the IRS came out in 1982 and said, well, you have to have a commensurate amount of life insurance coming along for the ride. Or else we're going to move it from tax-free insurance over to taxable investments, tax sooner or later investments, which are also subject to volatility. And so I'm okay. If that's what an investment is, I don't want one of those. I want tax-free insurance, which is way better than those investments. Does that make sense? And so they said a commensurate amount of insurance, but they gave it parity, meaning the older you were, the less insurance that was required, so you could earn 11 and net 10. And eventually the cash value, sooner than later, grows to equal and exceed the death benefit. A lot of agents don't understand that. So they didn't know what they were doing. In 1982, it was the Tax Equity Fiscal Responsibility Act. That's the TEFRA tax citation. 2 years later, they had to redefine it under the Deficit Reduction Act. That's called DEFRA. So TEFRA and DEFRA tax citations dictate the minimum amount of insurance required based upon the insured's age, gender, and health to accommodate the amount of money they wanted to reposition to put into it. Let's say they wanted to reposition $500,000. If they want to put $500,000 in, a 60-year-old back then had to have $1,250,000 of life insurance. You could buy way more life insurance than that for $500,000. That wasn't the objective. You wanted the least amount because you want the insurance to get cheaper as you get older. So it was $1,250,000 approximately. And then you put in the $500,000 and it can grow in 10 years to equal and then exceed the $1,250,000. And now there is no cost of the insurance because you're self-insured. Well, in 2020, 2021, they actually, because interest rates have been climbing back up again, they actually modified that. And now a 60-year-old who wants to put in $500,000 only needs $1 million of insurance, only twice as much. And so that's pretty incredible. So you can actually have your policy grow to equal the death benefit faster. Well, everything was hunky-dory back in 1984 to 1988, but there was a massive exodus of money that was leaving the banks, the brokerage firms, the credit unions to these because those institutions couldn't compete. They couldn't pay that high. They weren't tax-free. They didn't blossom when you died. So banks and credit unions, this is actually where they put 30 to 40% of their tier one assets for liquidity and safety. They're borrowing OPM, other people's money that gets deposited in the bank, and then they're turning around and putting some of that money into insurance companies to increase the safety and the liquidity and the rate of return by 5 times. Okay, many times these banks only pay 1% interest. They turn around and make 5%. That's 500% more. Every million, they pay $10,000 in interest. They earn $50,000 in the insurance company. Okay, so when the banks and credit unions were suffering, they said, well, we don't want to kill these because this is where we put our money. But we do want to slow the flow. They wanted to slow the flow of money because there was money just leaving in droves, and they couldn't handle that. So they said, so make it so that if somebody wants to reposition 500 grand, that they can only put in maybe 1/7 of that if it's whole life. If it's universal life, only 1/5 of that, 20% of that a year. And then hopefully they'll put in just 100 grand a year, and they'll slowly transfer the 500,000 over a 5-year period from us to that. Slow the flow of money so that we can handle this. So that's why they did it, okay? Now, again, this is called the 7-pay test with relation to whole life. Whole life, you have to spread out the maximum premium over 7 years, and you're required to have more life insurance. It's more expensive. And so that's why whole life can't compete with universal life, because universal life, you can get away with far less death benefit, but you can put in the money faster. So basically, over age 50, you had to spread it out maybe with 5 installments. They don't have to be equal, but let's just say 500,000 would require that you only could put in 100,000 a year. Okay. Now, since the year 2021, you might be able to put in 125,000 a year to get in that 500,000. So you can get it in faster with universal life. Okay. And that's why it performs better. That's one of the reasons. Okay, let's go back to this. Technically, if a person then after June 21st, 1988, that was passed as part of the Technical and Miscellaneous Revenue Act. It's called TAMRA. After June 21st, 1988, this person who wanted to put in 500,000, if they put money in faster than $100,000 per year, then it would turn into a MEC, a Modified Endowment Contract. Okay, now, you could actually put in $100,000 the first day of the first year, and then the first day of the second year, another 100, a first day of the third year, first day of the fourth year, but the first day of the fifth year is what? Actually 4 years and 1 day. So in 4 years and 1 day, that person could get in the 500 grand. But what if that person accidentally put in the second 100,000 because the insurance company sent them a premium billing notice, because that's their system, inviting them to put another 100 grand in, and they've never been late in their life, and so they're fastidious. They send in 100,000, and the insurance company receives a $100,000 payment. They're obligated to credit it the day they receive it. Well, that might be the 365th day of the first year. Guess what? They just created a MEC, a Modified Endowment Contract. So what is a MEC? A MEC means that you just MEC'd it up by meaning the money that you're paying in there now will still grow tax deferred, but not totally tax free. It's tax deferred. If you die, it will blossom to a tax-free death benefit. But you just messed up tax-free income. And that's usually the primary reason why most people take out a max-funded IUL, tax-free income. They put in 500 grand, it doubles to $1 million, 2 million, whatever, 8 million, okay? But whenever, every million can generate 100,000 a year of what? Tax-free income. It will not be tax-free if it's a MEC. So a MEC, it's sort of like most insurance companies have all these little like alarm systems that if it becomes a MEC, it's like MEC, 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 like a backup dump truck, okay? Well, it becomes a Modified Endowment Contract, meaning that if you take out money anytime in that policy forever after, it's not going to be taxable. It's going to be taxable. And it's going to be taxable LIFO. What's LIFO? Last in, first out. Meaning that the last money you're earning is the first money you're pulling out, which means if you're just wanting to take out the interest each year so that you don't deplete principal, this thing's going to be taxable the rest of your life. You did it for tax-free. So you want to avoid a MEC in that case. So avoid a MEC, comply. That's why it's important that you have a certified IUL professional that will make sure you're always late, okay? You don't pay the next premium until the next policy year. Instead of sending it in on the last day of the first year, make sure it arrives the first day of the next year, the soonest, okay? Now, what if you do accidentally pay more than you're allowed? And it's a MEC. You can perfect a MEC. You can un-MEC it. Here is the IRS rule. And you can do this as many times as you MEC it. It's not a one-time chance. If I overfund it, okay, I can tell the insurance company to refund every dollar I overpaid in that policy year that caused the MEC, to un-MEC it. They can refund the money, and then I'll redeposit it. Even if now the next year has happened, you can just turn around, they refund it, you turn around and send it right back, and now it's been credited in a new policy year. You just perfected a MEC. It's no longer a MEC. And I had clients that actually, they put in $500,000 and then asked for a refund of $400,000 plus interest at the end of the year, and they perfected the MEC, and then they deposit again, and then they refund and deposit again, refund and deposit again. I'm not recommending that, but you can perfect a MEC as many times as you want. But here's the rule. The insurance company has to adhere to the IRS guideline. If you create a MEC, you have a 60-day window to perfect a MEC following the next policy anniversary after the date it was a MEC. It became a MEC. And people go, what? Oh, okay, explain that. So let's use two scenarios. Let's say that you put in more money than the IRS allows under TAMRA the first day. How much time do you have to perfect that MEC and ask for a refund? If that's the first day of the policy, you have an entire year and another 60 days to ask for a refund and then redeposit the money. That's 14 months. But what if, like the former example, you send in the next 100,000 and it arrives the last day of the first policy year and the insurance company credits it and now it's a MEC? How many days do you have to perfect that MEC? When's the next policy anniversary? The next day. It's not a year from then, it's the next day. You have basically 61 days to perfect the MEC. So if you create a MEC on towards the end of that policy year, you better get your act together within 60 days and ask for a refund and redeposit it back into the policy to perfect the MEC so that then you preserve tax-free access to the money. Does that make sense? So let me finally ask, when doesn't it matter if it's a MEC? I have many situations where we don't care if it's a MEC. What would that be? If the client isn't doing it for tax-free income, if their primary objective is to maximize what they leave behind when they die, if that's why they're doing it, well, then they're not going to maximum fund it probably, number one. Number two, it's going to be tax-free when they die. It doesn't matter if it's a MEC. So, for example, I had a client that came to me at age 70 and a half, and back then that's when you had to start taking RMDs. He had $500,000 in his IRAs and 401ks, and his advisor was telling him, oh, just take out RMDs and keep stretching it out. And he did the math. He was never going to be in a lower tax bracket. And so he was going to do a strategic rollout, which normally I would take that $500,000 and just take out $100,000 a year to avoid a MEC. No, he came in and he said, Doug, I'm never going to be in a lower tax bracket, and I am never going to use or need this money. So it hit me in your seminar, why am I going to leave $500,000 in an IRA or 401k and take out RMDs thinking I'm saving tax because when I die, okay, they're going to be forced to pay tax on this thing. In the meantime, I'm paying 40%. I leave behind $500,000 tax. Well, they might be lucky to net $300,000. So he said, Doug, I'm going to pull out all $500,000 and just bite the bullet and pay 40% because I'm not going to ever be in a lower bracket than that. I'm going to pay $200,000 in tax, and I now have a net of $300,000. And I want you to calculate what's the most life insurance, not the least, the most life insurance I can have to accommodate $300,000. And he says, if it makes a MEC, I don't care because it'll be tax-free when I die. I'm not going to use it for living benefits. And he said, I want as much life insurance as I can get so that the $300,000 will keep it in force for 10 years. Now, if I still am alive in 10 years, I will take the responsibility of continuing to put the money in. Well, that was incredible. So we took out $1.5 million of insurance. If I was repositioning $500,000 after tax or $300,000 and took the least amount, it would be $600,000. If he died, he leaves behind $600,000, which is better than the IRA to 401ks. But now when he dies, he's going to leave behind $1.5 million. That was incredible, and that's totally tax-free. If that created a MEC, it didn't matter. So sometimes it doesn't matter if you create a MEC if you're trying to maximize what you leave behind. And by the way, a MEC, because it blossoms and transfers tax-free, it's still tax-deferred. So sometimes a MEC is better than just leaving the money where it's at in a bank or credit union. So a MEC isn't all that bad, but generally speaking, if you're going to maximum fund it, you want to avoid a MEC, comply with TAMRA, and do it the right way. IUL is a way better way to max fund than a whole life policy. And you need to understand the ramifications. So the best way to do that is by studying my book, The Laser Fund. This has been flying off of our warehouse shelves. We send out about 500 of these a week. You can buy it on Amazon for $20. It's 300 pages, jam-packed with charts and graphs and explanations on this side. If you're a right brain learner, you learn more by stories. You flip it over to this book. And this is 100 pages with 62 actual client stories. So this is left brain, right brain. If you want to use your whole brain, read the entire book, or both books. Now, if you buy it on Amazon, thank you, but I'll gift you one free. You simply go to laserfund.com or click on the link below, and you contribute a nominal amount towards the shipping and handling. I require a little bit of skin in the game, and then I'll cover the rest of that, and I'll pay for the book. I will fire out a hard copy to you via priority mail. But here's what I want you to do. When you're in there claiming your free copy, if you like to listen and learn or watch and learn, there's choices there for audio and video formats. But there's a choice there where you can actually schedule a free, quick consultation with a certified IUL professional at no cost or obligation so that you can ask questions, get clarifications, and you can actually get some illustrations to see how this may apply in your particular set of circumstances by a certified IUL professional. Those are few and far between. This is a certification we developed, which is extreme intensive training, and then they have to pass a 100-question proficiency exam with what percent score? 100%. If they score 95%, they don't get certified. They have to get 100% of the questions correct or else they're not certified. So you want to make sure it's done correctly. Take advantage of the quick, no cost, no obligation consultation. And if you say thanks but no thanks, they're not going to bill you for their time. But if you want to implement it and you want to make sure it's done right, you may have a good relationship with this person. And I'd recommend you make sure it's done correctly, or that they point you to somebody who has proven to know what they're doing, okay? So this is not about us, this is about your brighter future. Claim your copy of the Laser Fund book now and understand some of these technicalities. Check out the other educational YouTube videos about definitions of IUL terminology, whether you're a member of the general public or if you're a financial advisor. We love teaching both.